Okay, so yeah, let's nail down a weekend to go and where to hit the lights.
Yeah, I got you.
Thanks. So with half the class out, I don't want to make a final decision today, but we'll get the list out there. All right, so we're not talking about Tahoe. We are talking about
Other side of the country.
yeah. Let's see here. Get rid of this stuff. So like Daniel Boone. Oops. Specifically, what we're talking about at Daniel Boone is the Clifty Wilderness area, which is a bit indirect from here, but it's a cool spot. What am I looking at here? That's a hop, skip, and jump from here.
It's a really big wilderness area.
It is, and as you can see, they got some relief. It's very similar in character and style to the Shawnee National Forest. Forest structure, composition, land use history. It's got a little bit more relief than our bluff country does. So they have just more miles of cliff walls here than we do on the Shawnee. So the driving to and in here is a little bit more sort of windy and indirect. We'll spend some more time on the road. But it's pretty cool. And it's also like Southern Illinois' Shawnee. It's very similar in the fact that it's got a bunch of small gateway communities. So these are going to be pretty important for the Forest Service, in this case, to rely on for all of the visitor services and amenities. You get your full tank of gas, you get your gallon of white gas, throw it in your Coleman stove before you head out into the wilderness and stuff like that. And in that way, the Forest Service doesn't have to provide that stuff. We don't have to be in that business, right? So you'll recognize the layout of some of those places. The key gateway community for Daniel Boone is a place called Miguel's, and it is a world-famous dirtbag rock climber spot. So even just from space, you can see like the tent city, which is I've never seen this empty before. And we've gone in like the middle of December, January and stuff when it's pretty miserable for climbing. And it's this huge, just like pizza place, but also camping. They have a pretty awesome gear shop. Stuff's kind of expensive, but it's really good back there. And it's like, for those who know, they go. And that is a spot that anchors a ton and supports a ton of recreation and all their other green pixels on the map here. So,
How many people do you estimate a year visit this Daniel Boone Park and all these other little spots that we're looking at? Especially at this time of year where we're going. Do you think we'll be overcrowded? Do you think maybe less than 100 people on the trail?
I don't know offhand. Spring and fall are peak season on the Daniel Boone, just like with Shawnee, because it's the same latitude. This is slightly more south, but same thing. So it can get pretty miserable with the transpiration in the summer, and the humidity and all that stuff. So, yeah, we'll
So
see.
we're going to have a good time then.
We'll see some people there. Last time we went around this time of year, there were probably 400 or 500 people staying around Miguel's. I mean, it was busy, and it was like an hour and a half to wait to get the pizza. It is really good pizza, but it's also just pizza, so it's like, whatever. So yeah, people will get their Miguel's bumper sticker and say, yeah, I've been, man. Oh, it was sick, In the Ozarks, we got a whole bunch of formal federally designated wilderness, and then de facto wilderness in the form of a bunch of pretty cool little spots tucked away, not run by the Forest Service or Park Service, but by the Nature Conservancy, functionally as wilderness, primarily as habitat. Right? So last class we were talking about those 13 principles,
Yeah.
right? And managing for pristine at the extreme end of the spectrum. Well, that totally checks the box for Nature Conservancy's management goals. So they're very happy to do that and have human use on those spots. That looks a lot like wilderness use, but it's not just run by a federal agency. It's run by a huge international not-for-profit. So, like, we could look at the 11-Point River. Anything in the Ozarks country, there's a billion of them. There are some federally designated wilderness areas over there too. So they're going to be kind of sometimes around this area here, which is the lower Ozark National Scenic Riverways area. So Van Buren is right here. This starts the huge section of the Current River where there's a bunch of motorboats and stuff like that. The water wilderness is going to be between the Current River going through Van Buren and kind of north by Ellington and up and over. It goes kind of north by northwest up towards, this is a really cool wildland / state park interface, but Montauk State Park, which is funny to me because Montauk is a Native American word that originated in like northern New England, and the guy who named this like thought the word sounded cool or something like that, so he's like, oh, just call it Montauk. Anyway, so the headwaters of the Upper Current River are at Montauk Springs, and there's a huge, like millions per year trout fish hatchery run by the state at Montauk State Park, and they'll basically truck freshwater fish, mostly all trout, all over the state from here. It's just like Little Grassy Fish Hatchery, for those of you guys who've been there. And so we got this like industrial fish raising operation, fish farming, and then like 500 meters downstream from that, we flip over into federal management of the Current River. There's the fish hatchery. And at around 10 Vat River access, it switches over to National Park Service management. And so instead of having fly fishermen every 30, 40 feet on both sides of the upper river, just like pulling trout out, like there's a ton of them right there. That's where they get released, for the Current River anyway. And the fish have to slalom through that. And then they get into this wilderness section, and they're basically home free. It's like peak high quality habitat for them and stuff like that. So we don't usually get this in wilderness areas, especially east of the Mississippi, where we got, or I guess this is west of Mississippi,
Yeah,
right?
this is west.
We definitely don't get a whole lot of stuff with like industrial support of the resources that folks are going for in wilderness. So it's kind of a unique spot right here to experience that juxtaposition, having that big thing upstream of a wilderness area. Usually the upstream section is the most remote, right? Up in the mountains somewhere, something like that. So that's an interesting thing for wilderness management, and that's pretty cool to poke around there for a little bit. If you like fly fishing, bring a pole if we decide to go there, and so forth. So I think Pine Mountain Wilderness there is not too far from here. Piney? I might be misremembering that. Let's see. No, it's in Arizona. All right. So yeah, the Mark Twain has some wilderness areas. around it. I'm blanking on the names right now, but there's kind of a diffuse stipple of those wilderness areas around here just south of Van Buren again. And also we've got those TNC private managed wildernesses there as well.
Dan, we've only been an hour away from there. I've gone to Poplar Bluff to get gas a few times. I didn't realize how close that was to there.
There's also, separately from Park Service Managed Wilderness, Forest Service Managed Wilderness, TNC Wilderness, there's also the Pioneer LAD Forest. They got some virgin timber stands there. Just everything else has been logged out like 5 times in a row, and left, and then kind of grudgingly replanted in places. So it's a pretty worked over landscape all across the Mark Twain. And then you get these LAD forest plots, and they're different. Like it's a cool historic land conservation story. We can talk about when we get there. But so there are 3 different sort of flavors or styles or types or access levels of wilderness. If we go to the Ozarks area. So, what do you think? We could potentially go somewhere else, like we could look at Western Tennessee, something like that. There might be a little bit there, maybe like towards Shiloh, National Battlefield, or Oak Mountain, something like that. But
That'd be cool.
these are generally the 2 directions we go. But if you guys want to surface something else, we can do that.
Well, you just brought up Shiloh. Anything, so talking about those 13 points that we do with that, is it within like the same distance as the pizza place that's 6 hours away? McGill's Pizza.
Miguel's. Let's see. All right, so we got Shiloh, Battlefield, some wildlife management areas around there. We have Tennessee Valley Authority, which is a major land manager in Tennessee, primarily created to do rural electrification during the Great Depression and World War II era, stuff like that for Kentucky and the poorer parts of Tennessee, mountain sections. But they do not wildernesses, but wild areas. So it's kind of like that, but TVA, it's not really their wheelhouse or their primary mission to do that stuff. So TVA, Army Corps of Engineers, both manage a ton of wild areas, and don't have that same great sort of buy-in or interface with the Wilderness Act and stuff like that. So that might be interesting to check out if you want to do that.
Is it in the same time frame
Let's see.
Because I know we're going to be leaving, Thursday, going home Sunday. Is that the itinerary goal? So Thursday night, Thursday afternoon, then Friday, Saturday, out there, and then Sunday back.
Yeah, we could leave, if you guys are okay with it, as late as Thursday afternoon, and get back as late as Sunday evening, or leave as late as Friday morning, get back Sunday morning. So depends on where we go and who's available when. So, all right, it's about 4 hours. Call it 5 for us with university vehicles and stuff, and like stopping halfway for somebody vaping or something like that. Down to Shiloh. It's about 3.5 out west to Ozarks. And let's see. Clifty Wilderness.
Don't you hate what technology don't do? 6 hours.
6 hours, call it 7. Yeah. For gas stops, stuff like that. So yeah.
Well,
So Ian, we were just talking about different places to go for our field trip, and we can go with or without my other class. They're going to Ozark Scenic Riverways end of this month. We talk about local. This would be more like backpacking. So if your knees are not feeling excited about backpacking, flip that one down. North Ozarks, we can load people in canoes. I mean, you know that score pretty well last year. And Daniel Boone National Forest is going to be more backpacking.
I'm down for a canoe trip. What about you guys?
It's fine with me.
National Scenic Riverway was pretty cool. I enjoyed that.
All right. Would you be all right going back there?
Yeah.
All right. If we went this time and if we decided to go with the other guys, the interp class and so forth,
I would drive
we'd
myself.
go further upstream. We'd start at Tanvat, which is, again, right past the border from the state park, and do our
Levels
thing
are
there.
Usually a little bit higher in springtime than fall.
Say again?
The river levels are usually a little bit higher in spring
Significantly.
and fall.
Significantly, yeah. So the winter monsoons and all the spring rains, you
Yeah.
know,
Plus
march
all
in
the
like a
snow.
lion, out like a lamb. April showers. Yeah, we'll be on the high side for water. I'm not aware that it's been catastrophic. That usually happens a little bit later in the spring if we just happen to schedule the field trip right after some big storm. Just dumb bad luck. We've had to cancel the trip a couple times for that, or move it elsewhere. But February is usually not an issue for that. It will be cold, of course, if you decide to go then. Or we can go separate weekend a little bit later on. Up to you guys. So that's what I'm looking at. What do you think?
What about the week after, you guys? That way we go the week of spring break, it's a little bit warmer. I'm just throwing that out there as a suggestion. I'm not sure if that's your fire weekend.
No, that's why I said not the second, that's fire weekend.
That's what I just said, I'm not sure if that's the fire weekend though.
Oh, yeah.
That might be, yeah, let's
I
pull up
think that is the
calendar.
You guys are the week before spring break.
I mean,
And that's 2 weeks before spring break.
Oh, I thought you said a week after spring break.
I mean, it wound up being chilly when we went out there. It still was a good time. Like when you're canoeing, you're not cold because you're.
No, you're warmer.
Yeah, that was early November, was it?
I think it was late October.
Okay.
Like one of the last weekends of October. Just happened to be.
So we're on the flip side, we'll have the early sun and go late.
So March 2nd is the following weekend. Yeah, it's Saturday, 7 days later.
If we go on this weekend, I feel like we have a better chance of less people and more of an adventure trip, and I think that's what we all want. I'm just,
Yeah.
you know, I feel like that's the vibe, you know.
Okay,
Do
so
it
jump in
Nash-
with Interp. Yeah, that'll do double duty for Nash. He's only got to go on one field trip instead of two. So
I don't think Nash is gonna care though. But I mean, I'm
this
just
will be
throwing
like
that
his
out there.
third time with me, maybe going to Ozarks, or maybe second.
Which weekend is this going to be if we go with the other class?
The weekend, Friday the 23rd through February 25th. So that's 2 weekends from now.
Okay.
Coming up.
Just gotta get some cold weather gear and we're good.
That's right. But yeah, it's a perfectly valid thing. So yeah, I'll call up any of the outfitters. It's a little bit more money to drag canoes up to Tanvat, but we can do something like
Only ask Rick.
Tanvat just past Acres Ferry, where we started last time,
Yeah.
and see some new terrain and some familiar stuff too.
We can ask Rick if we can loan one of his canoes or two of them. I'm
Yeah.
sure he wouldn't mind.
Well,
If we paid a
Well, the
rental
university's
fee.
got a bunch of canoes over at Touch that we've borrowed in the past too. But the
Can we strap him to
the
the top
gas
of
to
the
haul 'em 4 hours up there ends up actually being more expensive than the outfitting, believe
Can
it
we
or not.
fit the canoes in the van if we had nobody in the van? Like, let's say if we had, like, so Ian, I'm driving separately and Ian Piggy's with me. Can you and Nash drive them up and Kid rolls with me and
Canoes are long.
They are long, but I'm just asking, can we fit in the van? Is it a possibility?
We'd have to trailer them. If we're bringing the other class as well, that'll be another 6 people on the
Right.
3 canoes. So
I was just asking just to get a general idea, just trying to figure out like, hey, like, there's no problem, I'm just.
we could put 1 canoe on a vehicle just using like pool noodles and straps. We could fit that. That's about it.
But one canoe one canoe would be cool for 2 people, but there's 5 of us in this class.
Right.
So
And
we're
6
gonna have
in
to
the
have
other.
a gear, yes, we're gonna have to have a gear canoe and 2 and 2
space in each canoe for both occupant stuff. We can even do 3 people plus gear in a canoe. That's been done before. So yeah, cool. I think we'll be good to go with that.
Do you wanna do that weekend, the 23rd, 25th, guys?
That's perfectly fine with me.
All right.
You got no complaints? I got no complaints, I'm sure Nash don't either, since you don't have to do 2 trips then.
I will complain if we get there and it's like 32 degrees, but that happens.
It shouldn't be at the end of February, but you know,
Spring
plan
came
for the
early this
worst,
year.
hope for the best. We'll load out for 20-degree nights, as always. I mean, just standard operating procedure for us here in Southern Illinois. And yeah, if anybody needs gear, I have a bunch of stuff. I'm the advisor for the backpacking club, so I have full sets of gear for 6 or 8 people. If you have your own stuff, absolutely bring that, and let's put some miles and rack up some sleeping bag nights.
Sounds good.
It'll be good. Think about what you guys want to do for food and stuff like that. We want to.
Your oatmeals and weenies, right? Cowboy breakfast?
No, man, we want to eat like kings. Oatmeal's like that's just entry level. We could do better.
That's what I said, cowboy breakfast, hot dogs and eggs.
There you go.
Hot sauce, right? Yeah, breakfast special.
And if you guys want, in these next 2 weeks,
Borderline between roughing it and glamping.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat.
we can probably each pick like one meal and bulk buying stuff like 18 eggs versus each person buying 6 or whatever. Save a couple of bucks on food, eat a little bit cheaper but better than we do at home is the goal. And we're going to be working a little bit hard, so we want to
Is this
stoke
mostly
that
gonna
engine.
be on the water, or are we backpacking some of this?
So I have 2 students that I'm aware of with mobility constraints, so I want to make sure that that's going to be loud in the recording. Make sure that everybody is good to go, right? So the point here isn't to get exercise; it's to
Enjoy nature.
learn a bunch of stuff and spot interp in their case and wilderness management in ours in action. So we'll do exactly that. And yeah, so the mobility constraints suggest more float time, less humping time, carrying a pack all over the place. The slopes on the trails in this area are high, very high. So it can be a bit of a punishing landscape to go cross country on. So for that component of the wilderness stuff, the pathfinding, the stealth camping, that sort of thing, we'd probably de-emphasize that a little bit more, just talk about it instead of sweat it out. So.
So just 2-night camp?
Yep. Yeah, Friday night, Saturday night.
Alright, so.
Or if you guys, if everybody's cool with the Thursday launch, we can talk about that. It'd be leaving here, Thursday whenever, as soon as everybody can, and basically driving to our first campsite, throwing down tents because it'll be dark by then. Leave here at 2 o'clock, get there at 7, and
Feel the launch Thursday, boys.
I've got a class till 4:15, and after that,
okay.
I'm fine.
You're in that class too, right?
I'm not a huge fan of setting my campsite in the dark.
Got it.
Neither am I, but I'm a good fan of breaking early in the morning though, to get, like on Friday, let's say, get on the water where, it's clear.
Okay.
That's the only thing I'm thinking of, but I'm a fan of that too. I don't like making my camp in dark. That's a bitch.
Yeah, if we're limited to leaving, if your class is over at 4:30, we wouldn't gather till 5. And that would get us there.
And then we have a 4-hour drive, so it'd be.
Yeah.
There's no point making camp at 10 o'clock.
Right. That's hard on morale. It's a hard way to start. So let's hold off on the Thursday launch and
We'll do a Friday morning launch then?
yes. And if you guys are cool with it, let's start like early Friday.
Well, I wake up at 4. We gotta worry about Princess here. He's gotta do his makeup.
Heck, just stay up from the night before.
That's what I almost did last night.
But
Smacked me at 7 a.m.
Crashing.
so we got some pretty good options on launching, but earlier is generally better. So I'll pull the other class starting next week, and 6-7 o'clock is great for me. Let's do it.
I'm same with that. The only thing I gotta do is just get a backpack, or not a backpack, a sleeping bag this weekend.
That's right.
Cause
Plus, if we start super early, everybody's gonna be tired, and that means less shenanigans.
You down and drive with me, Martha?
I'd rather stick bus.
I'm more of a vaping and smoking on my own kind of term, though. Yeah, I don't do that. I don't wanna spew my guts if I put it in.
All right, so that's decided. I'll update Nash. He wasn't able to join us for class today, but he let me know beforehand. That's fine.
Dude, you're gonna let Nash know this afternoon, he's gonna be like, cool. That's
Yeah,
exactly what he's
pretty
gonna
much.
say. He's gonna be like, cool. And do the little hair thing.
Let's see. Wake up.
It's actually, I'm kinda excited about this, boys. I don't know about you. I know you've gone there before, but how would you rate it the first time going?
It was a great time. I mean, like, we saw 3 other groups the 2 days we were on the river.
We had a pretty good group of students too. It was pretty chill.
We would pretty much just paddle around and are like, this could be our campsite tonight. What do we want a little bit further? So, this is good.
Okay. I like this vibe, dude.
Yeah, and that is formally that site navigation and selection is that is formally a part of the wilderness experience. Like, it's important that we have to do that and that we can do it in the first place.
Good.
So we'll talk about how to manage for that, you know. And it works out pretty well. So, all right. On our course website, we had a couple of announcements and tasks go live in the past day or two. We have some key definitions and people, and we'll kind of parcel out across everybody, and that's got to be more interesting than me just talking at you guys in a classroom. So there's that. Take a look at that announcement, and then the other top announcement is the Aldo Leopold River of the Mother of God essay. It's written 100 years ago by kind of the father of wildlife ecology, certainly in the U.S. And it's a super easy read. It's like a 4-page PDF, but it's like book pages, so they're tiny. And it's just him kind of like rambling and reflecting about this sort of quasi-imaginary or legendary river pouring into the Amazon from the Andes Mountains in northern South America. And it's cool. He takes that as kind of not a literal place, but just talking about, it's important that these sort of quasi-mythic rivers exist. And it's important that we don't quite know where they start or quite where they end. And 40 years, exactly 40 years before the passage of the Wilderness Act, he's explicitly writing a whole bunch of stuff calling out wilds and wilderness in kind of the era. So in 1924, the National Park Service was less than 10 years old, and he barely mentions parks at all. He barely mentions forests at all. He's specifically talking about wildlands and that wild, difficult, rugged, kind of dangerous character of these places that's just completely incompatible with economics, as he says. So, with the River of the Mother of God essay, I just posted the PDF on there. I'll try and find a better PDF that's not all like marked up and lined up and stuff. That was somebody's personal scan. I'll post that too if I find it. Just read through this 4.5-page essay, whatever it is, and find me 3 things that you agree with, that just kind of resonate with you. And it's not, these days it's not a super hot take, but back then, in a little bit, it kind of was. Like, in the 20s, this is right after World War I, like right after. And he's responding to essentially the mechanization of World War I, the chemical warfare, all this industrialization that, you know, World War I is one of the first major wars where industry is kind of one of the warfighting systems beyond just the, you know, training and the equipment and whatever on the battlefield technology is present. So it's kind of interesting to read through it. So find me 3 things that you agree with that, you know, you're just reading through and it's like, yeah, that slaps. And then find me 3 other things that are surprising or maybe that you disagree with or that, you know, maybe seemed right to him at that time 100 years ago, but maybe something shifted. All right? So the point is not to agree with everything here, not to agree with me, but just to take a look at a very, very, very influential essay.
And dissect it.
Yeah, in its timeline, about a half century before the creation of wilderness, right after World War I, right after the creation of the Park Service, and as he is literally inventing wildlife ecology and, you know, popularizing that. So, I think it'll be an interesting read. So we'll have a class discussion about that on Tuesday, and we'll get after it.
I get the title one more time. That was
It's
a
on
crazy
D12.
title.
Yeah, it's on D12. It's on the front page of our course
That's
website,
crazy.
but it's called The River of the Mother of God. It's an essay by Aldo Leopold, 1924.
Yep, you read all that from Carter's class, remember? Carver? Yeah, with Akamani.
Yeah, so this is a guy that wrote Sand County Almanac. He was a great scientist, but maybe even more importantly than being a scientist, like there are lots of good scientists, he's a really, really, really good communicator. And so he's like one of the very few people. He's like the Carl Sagan of his generation. Like he's up there with the science and functional with it and leading in his field, kind of inventing his field.
Kind of like a
But
late
also-
transcendentalist, or
He's more of like the Henry David Thoreau. He's trying to get us back to nature, but explain it scientifically, like why we should look at it differently through his eyes.
That's a great question. Okay, so the Transcendentalists, mid 1800s, writing stuff, and the anti-Transcendentalists writing stuff like a whole bunch of poetry, kind of in praise of nature, but also in praise of God as expressed and found in nature. So they add a very sort of a positive spiritual take on nature versus, you know, some previous opinions of wildlands are where you go to die, right?
This is God's creation. He gave us this is a beautiful thing.
Yeah, so they did that. Leopold doesn't really talk so much about God per se. Maybe that's significant, especially in the 1920s when it was socially acceptable to couch everything in terms of God or whatever. And he more, oh, pull it up here. He more is talking about stuff like the natural tendency of manhood, for example. These days we might say personhood, but manhood in his day. Well, yeah.
I know.
Is towards like the difficult and wild things. So let me find where that is. Let's see. All right, so you'll read stuff like, so these were important changes and updates in his day. So when I read that Macmillan has planted the radio among the Eskimos of the furthest polar seas, right? First radio was in his lifetime and stuff like that. And that Everest is all but climbed. Well, now it's climbed a lot. And that Russia is founding fisheries in Wrangell land. Now we have Wrangell St. Elias, the huge wildlife refuge, right? Up in Alaska. I know the time is not far off when there will be no more a short line on the map, like the river of the Mother of God, with no start and no end. It just vanishes into the Amazon. Motorboats will sputter through those trackless forests. The clank of steam hoists will be heard in the mountains of the sun, and there will be photographs and chewing gum upon the river of the Mother of God. Pollution and litter, right? So that's
Very
where
good
we're at
point
now.
How he's writing this.
Yeah, yeah, and the guy's a badass scientist too, so go figure.
He must have indulged in some pre-nerves.
And his descendant, A. Starker Leopold, advances the wildlife science side of it even more. Anyway, here we go. Let's see. Ever since Paleolithic man became conscious that his own home hunting ground was only part of a greater world, unknown places have been a seemingly fixed fact in human environment and usually a major influence in human lives. So he's saying, like, this is how we came up. Like, Man vs. Wild, like that old TV show, right? With Les Stroud or whatever. And now we got chewing gum in the Amazon, right? So he's saying, look, this is progress, but is it progress in a good direction? You know, like, are we skipping towards the cliff, or are we losing something in advancing, so to speak, technologically? I think not, he says. In fact, there's an instinctive human reaction against the loss of fundamental environmental influences, of which history records many examples. The chase, for instance, so like hunting, was a fundamental fact in the life of all nomadic tribes. Again and again, when these tribes conquered and took possession of agricultural regions, where they settled down and became civilized and had no further need of hunting, they nevertheless continued it as a sport. And as such, it persists to this day with 10 million devotees in America alone, which is a big number because America is like a sixth of the size that it is now back when he's writing this, right? So 10 million people is like 60 million people now, something like that. So commerce and development have regretfully and temporarily left us here and there. We're modest adventurers, to be sure, compared with Hanno or Lewis and Clark, but so is the sportsman with his setter dog in pursuit of partridges, a modest adventurer compared with his Neolithic ancestor in single combat with the auroch bull. The point is that, along with the necessity for expression of racial instincts, there happily goes that capacity for illusion, which enables little boys to fish happily in wash tubs. That capacity is a precious thing, if not overworked. So the fact of, little boys and girls turning every stick into either a sword or a gun, seeing how hard and how far you can throw rocks into the woods and stuff like that, seeing what you can hit, like, he's saying that's a really good thing, and we're in danger of losing that, and don't we need something wild to kind of re-engage with? So even 100 years when 100 years ago, southern Missouri at that time was clear cut from one side to the other. So that's the context in which he's writing this stuff. It's going to be another 40, almost 50 years before Ozark National Scenic Riverways is created, and they can start to get it back to wild character, and that's going to take the last 40, 50 years, right, since the 1960s. So, et cetera, on down the list. So, yeah, find 3 things that you agree with. Just highlight them in your printout or copy paste them out of the text and, throw them into a text document or an email, something like that. And 3 things that you either disagree with or are surprised by and just hadn't really thought about before. You won't have any trouble finding those 6 things. Not a big deal. So yeah. Any question on that stuff? Directions for the definitions and people stuff is in the other announcement on the course website. So just pull that up. And neither one's going to take particularly long. So roll through those for Tuesday. We'll come back to it.
Good.
Let's send a couple minutes early. I'm around for questions, and if you have any concerns about the trip or clarifying stuff, ask me now, or we can chat about it on Tuesday. It's coming up though, so. Say again?
Or we got tomorrow.
Or we got tomorrow, yeah. If you're
We'll be
doing
here
something.
tomorrow if you guys got questions.
Alright.
Because we're going on our trip. Yeah, you already did your, yeah. I said rec.